This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. It's Indiana game week, and in suit we have the founder and publisher of Hoosier Huddle, a website solely dedicated to Indiana football. You don't find too many of those. I think it might be the only one of its kind. We have Sammy Jacobs here. Sam, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Alex. Happy to be on. A big game this weekend.
Absolutely, man. So, before we dive into stuff and get into Indiana, I want you to talk about Hoosier Huddle because to me, it's super interesting. I almost compare it to if someone were to start a Ohio State basketball site only. I would say, not arguably, I think facts are, over the last at least 20 years or so, Ohio State basketball has been better than Indiana football. But as far as how much people care about Ohio State football, I would say that's probably pretty equal to what they care about Indiana basketball. And it's like, if the football team's good, great, we'll kind of bandwagon. And I feel, unfortunately, it's the same for Ohio State basketball. So tell me, what, I know you went to IU, but what made you decide, what made you passionate about the football program? You've obviously followed them in some rough years as well as some of their better years of late. But, what made you start a football-only Indiana site?
So we'll start at the beginning. Jerry DiNardo is a family friend of ours, and he was at LSU, went to the XFL, then landed at IU. And that was in my college football formative years. So 2002, 2003, and 2004, when I was looking at colleges, Indiana was one that I went and visited. And if you've ever been to Bloomington, it is an absolutely beautiful place. And, growing up in New York City, I wanted to get out of New York for my college experience and go to a Big Ten school. And we had several players from my high school go out to Indiana. So I went to a couple of games. It's just natural to root for teams where your high school buddies go. And I'm one of those guys. Once you lock me in, you lock me in. I'm a Jets and Knicks fan too. So once I'm in, I'm in. It's like the mafia. I'm not, there's no getting out. So I started the blog with our buddy, with LD, our buddy, in 2013. We wanted to do something. There was just a market of opportunity and a spot of opportunity. Like you said, Indiana football is not that popular. And it was more of, I wanted to cover the team like how I wanted it to be covered. And while I was a student, people wrote articles. They had the nice bowl season 2017 or 2007 and things like that. But they didn't get into breaking down games and things like that make it so that make college football fun. It was just there's a game this weekend. They're playing, Kentucky, and they didn't go into the history of the rivalry with Kentucky, why it was the last game being played, the history of the bourbon barrel, why it was discontinued and things like that. So, it was just a window of opportunity. We went in 2013, and it's timing is everything. It's worked out. Outside of 2014, which was kind of a wonky year with Nate Sudfeld getting hurt, this team has won at least 5 games. And that's pretty good for this Indiana program. And now you're hitting that peak. And it's been fun to get in from, kind of at the bottom of it in year 3 of Kevin Wilson's tenure and see it grow and be part of that process.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's got to be interesting. Obviously somewhat disappointing for him because I think he hoped he was going to be the guy to take him here. But, Kevin Wilson's seen this firsthand this weekend and, being still in the Big Ten with Ohio State. I'm sure he's got to be a little bit proud. Tom Allen's definitely, one of his guys. And, I know they have a good relationship and whatnot. And, he didn't leave on the best of terms or the terms he would have liked to have left on. But, it's got to be interesting for him. Now, I can't imagine, maybe Kevin Wilson believed. I can't imagine you believed when you started covering this team that we would be talking about number 9 Indiana against number whatever they are, 3 Ohio State in 2020. I mean, how crazy is that to you?
I mean, it's pretty crazy, but it is also 2020, so everything's a little bit crazy. But it's, you know, you always talk as an Indiana site, what could Indiana become? And it was, being top 10 is awesome, but you look at it and you go, okay, like a program like Iowa or a program like Michigan State, where, you have these magical seasons every decade, but you're usually sitting around 6, 7, 8 wins. And that's where I think that's where I thought Indiana would live in that thing, because it's very difficult to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, with these stadiums with 100,000 people, with the facilities and recruiting and tradition and all that stuff. But there's no reason IU can't be Iowa. It can't be Northwestern. It can't be, Wisconsin used to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and Barry Alvarez took over, and now they're the best team in the West, and they're perennially, going in play for the college football playoff, in play for the Big Ten title. And there's no reason that Indiana can't fall in line with those schools who have made the most of what they have, and get to that point. So it's a shock to see it. Number 3, number 9 is pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think I would have I would have honestly bet $1 million if you told me before the year. I might have even done it just about beating Penn State and Michigan. If you said, I'll bet you $1 million Indiana will beat Penn State and Michigan, I probably would have shook your hand right then and there. You add in Ohio State, I would have made that a $10 million bet. But I think, entering this game, there's a realistic shot for Indiana to beat Ohio State. I mean, there's no home field advantage in the shoe with no fans. Ohio State hasn't played in a couple weeks. There's, I would say I don't want to say there's issues, because that's probably being a little spoiled when you talk about Ohio State, but there are question marks. I mean, I think everyone, there's inexperience in the secondary and on the defensive side of the ball with the guys that they lost. On the offensive line and running back, they look a little shaky. There was no spring ball. So, I mean, I know it's the same across the board, but when you have some inexperience, that's glaring early in a year. So, like, what's a realistic, I mean, you've always been pretty realistic, but like from a fan base standpoint, from your standpoint, covering Indiana from a media perspective, and just, talking with the rest of the beat and reading the boards and things like that, what is the mindset of the fan base and the media, not the team? Because I know the team's coming in thinking they can win, but what's your guys' mindset of this game, coming in this year?
Well, I think my mindset's a little different than the regular fan base and the rest of the media corps. To me, yeah, it's a huge game, but if you lose, it's not a season wrecker. I mean, you look at like Penn State, for example, this year. You could arguably say Indiana wrecked their season, and who knows? It's one of those things. Look, they were picked to maybe give Ohio State a run for the money for the Big Ten title, and they were as close as you could get to beating Indiana, and Indiana was, as close as you could get to losing. It was the millimeters or less on that, and but this game, it's an opportunity, and you're playing with house money. I think if you're Indiana, and if Ohio State comes out and plays their A game, there's maybe 1 or 2 teams in the country that could hang with them, maybe, and that's if they play their A game. So I liken it to facing it Randy Johnson when he was in his prime and throwing his A game. There's sometimes where there's nothing you could do. They're just that good that day. But for Indiana, you're playing with house money. You'd like to go in and fight and be competitive and keep it a game, but you also want to stay healthy for the rest of the season. Because if you go in, you're sitting at 4-0, and you have some major injuries, and you finish the season 4-4, the rest of the season really doesn't matter, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. I think that's great. I mean, I think that's why Ohio State fans are a little scared of this game, because they are playing with house money, and it's, you got nothing to lose. It's throw everything on the line. You beat Ohio State. You are sitting at 5-0 with controlling your own destiny to go to the Big Ten championship game. And honestly, with the way this year's playing out, potentially a shot at the college football playoff, which is, again, I've been a fan of what Indiana's doing, but to me, that's just it's so crazy to come out of my mouth. But I think the point you brought up about the Penn State game, I think it changed the fortune of the season for both programs. I think, you literally talk about a game of inches. That that dive for the pylon in overtime or whatever to go for two, or it just, if it goes the other way, Penn State's sitting at 1-0 coming in against Ohio State, and they probably still lose that game, but I don't think, I think the Indiana, yes, they've lost running backs. They lost, Micah Parsons before the year even started, a couple other things here and there. But I think that game, just emotionally broke them. And it was like, okay, we'll try to beat Ohio State the next week. And then that was just the dagger for them. But for Indiana, I mean, that game, I think it gave them a ton of confidence that we can hang with the best of the best in the Big Ten. And so I think you've seen a team playing with growing confidence. And as you said, they're coming into this game with house money. I think the big difference that I'm seeing this year for Indiana, I think under Tom Allen, and even Kevin, I should say under Tom Allen, I think you've seen an improving defense year over year. But I think the offense has been questionable. I think with Kevin Wilson, the offense was really good, but the defense was really bad. And the last few years, you've seen that switch. But now they have a quarterback. They have an offense. Nick Sheridan seems settling in nice in his new role at offense coordinator. That this offense can hang with teams in the Big Ten. I think they've had some yardage disadvantages in their games, but they've still found a way to win. But the offense has definitely improved. Tell us a little bit about that unit. What are the strengths and weaknesses? Who are the players that Ohio State fans need to know about this weekend?
Well, the strength is the passing game with Michael Penix at quarterback. He's a guy, he hasn't played a lot of football, even though he's a redshirt sophomore. He got hurt his freshman year. He only played in 3 games. He got hurt last year. He only played in 6 games, and you're going into game 5 now. So that's 14 games. You didn't have, he didn't get the bowl practices last year. He didn't have spring ball this year. He was coming off an ACL tear after his freshman year. So he's a guy who hasn't played a lot of football. And I think the performance against Penn State, where IU fans were totally freaking out that, oh God, we let Peyton Ramsey go up to Northwestern. It was kind of him shaking off the rust. And he's had back-to-back 300-yard passing games, which hasn't happened since 2015. If he gets protection, he could pick you apart. He's got a really, really good arm. He's got good vision on the field, and he's got some really good weapons at wide receiver. Ty Freifogel has had back-to-back 100-yard games. He had a 200-yard game at Michigan State. He was just added to the Biletnikoff watch list today. You have Whop Philyor, who came in as Indiana's number 1 wide receiver. He's a dynamic guy who can make plays, and he's probably getting the most attention by the defense and giving Freifogel more of an opportunity. You have Miles Marshall there too, who's come up with a whole bunch of catches that's played well. Jacoby Hewitt is a guy who was hurt last year. Prior to the season, he's come back. He's made some really big catches. He made 1 diving catch against Penn State going in for that tying touchdown around the 5-yard line. That was really impressive. In traffic and things like that. And then you have Peyton Hendershot at tight end, who was an all Big Ten tight end, set the IU tight end record for most receptions, receiving yards. And he's looks like an NFL caliber tight end. Stevie Scott's a bulldozer running back, but we'll get into that because I think the running game is kind of one of IU's weaknesses along with the offensive line. But you have some talent there. And Samson James, who is a former Ohio State commit who flipped back to Indiana, they have some talent, but it's all going to depend on, can this offensive line, they were out 2 starters against Michigan State with left tackle Caleb Jones and left guard Michael Kadick. Now, Dylan Powell, transfer from Stanford, came in and filled in nicely at guard, and Luke Haggard at left tackle. But the problem is Luke Haggard is 270 pounds. And that's a problem in the run offense, in run blocking. He was really good in pass blocking, but in order to move giant people, you have to be a giant person yourself. And 270 is kind of small on the giant end of a Big Ten line. But he's got some skills, some good footwork, and you just hope Caleb Jones, who's 6'8", 3'7", he might be the largest human being I've ever seen, and he could collapse that side of the line and help the run game. But it's what your offense is as good as your offensive line, because if you're not giving Penix time and you can't get a little bit of a run game going, it's very hard. You saw it in 2017 with Richard Lego just dropping back, and I think he threw 65 passes. You can't win games like that where you're just taking 3 steps and throw it up and hope your athletes make plays, because that's not going to work. Even though Ohio State's secondary is inexperienced, they're still tremendous athletes, and they're going to make plays, especially if you throw 50-50 balls. It's just a matter of time before something happens.
Yeah, those offensive linemen that were out last week, do we know if they're going to be playing this week?
We haven't gotten an injury report on there. They send out their inactive list about an hour or two before the game. Kadick missed the Michigan game. It is unclear what his injury is, and Jones is like a mystery injury. I don't know what that is. It could be. You just hope it's not COVID related, because that would probably wipe out the rest of his season. But hopefully he's back. But the Indiana inactive list comes out about an hour, 2 hours before the game, and we'll have it up on the site as soon as it's emailed to us.
Gotcha. Cool. Now, I think the Indiana passing offense versus the Ohio State secondary. And then to some extent, the Ohio State defensive line, which hasn't gotten a ton of pressure on the quarterback this year against that offensive line. To me, that's the key of the game right there. If Indiana's O-line can keep Penix clean and he can kind of take advantage of some of those inexperienced guys in the secondary, it's going to be a close game. If not, forget about it. It could be over quick. But I think everyone on the Ohio State side has heard about this Indiana defense. They love to blitz. They love to be aggressive. They make plays, turnovers. Tell us a little bit about the defense. Again, strengths, weaknesses, a few guys to watch.
So Indiana's best pass rusher is like a 5'10" corner who weighs 180 pounds. Just like you draw it up on the recruiting boards, let's go get that. Tywin Mullen he's just a sophomore. He's that star of the defense in the secondary. He had his first two career picks at Michigan State. He's an excellent tackler. He's a really good blitzer too. I don't know how much Indiana you've watched, but if you watch him against Rutgers, they have shots. They blitz the corners a lot. Him and Reese Taylor will blitz a lot, and they disguise it really well. And he can line up against a receiver, face up, and just go. He has enough speed to get into the backfield and get by offensive linemen. I'm sure Kevin Wilson knows how to defend that or, prevent that and things like that. But it seems that teams haven't stuck a tight end out there or put a running back out there as much as they probably should have. Another guy to watch is Micah Mcfadden at linebacker. He's Indiana's leading tackler. He had 2.5 sacks last week. He led the team in tackles for loss the year before. He was a guy, he had like 300 tackles his senior year of high school. And he just, on tape, didn't look as athletic as everybody else in Florida. But he's just, anytime you get 300 tackles in a season, you have a nose for the football, you're a grinder, you work hard. He's a Tom Allen guy. But now he's been in the Indiana strength program for 3 or 4 years now, and he's got that speed. He could blitz and all those things. The Indiana defensive line deserves credit too. They played really well, even though they're not getting the sack numbers and tackle for losses. They're demanding double teams and letting those linebackers run around. Now, one of the potential losses on Indiana's defense was Cam Jones. He went out against Michigan State. He got out on a targeting penalty, so it could be a concussion type deal. Which could hold him out a couple weeks. But again, it'll be on the inactives list and things like that. For Indiana, you hope that it wasn't. He just got his bell rung and he'll be back. But as soon as that hit happened, they took him to the locker room and he did not return. Another loss on that is Thomas Allen. If you watch that Michigan State game, Allen he's Tom Allen's son, of course. He had a forced fumble, but he had a horrific injury that they carted him off. So Indiana's depth on defense is going to be tested, but that secondary is the strength of that defense, and they have plenty of depth even without Marcelino Ball. You have some of these young guys who were playing well last year. Now they're sophomores and juniors, and really hitting their stride in terms of playing ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those Ohio State fans listening, Taiwan Mullin is the younger brother of Trayvon Mullen, a former Ohio State recruit, high school teammate at Coconut Creek of Benjamin Victor. Ended up going to Clemson and now is on the Las Vegas Raiders. And Taiwan, there's actually a third Mullen coming up who's pretty good as well. So I watched a bunch of IU football this year, Penn State game, Michigan game, a little bit last week with Ohio State off, and Mullen's the real deal. I think before we get into our prediction, last thing I want to ask is keys to the game for both teams. What does Indiana need to happen for this game, for them to win this game? And then what does Ohio State need to do, to come out with a victory and avoid the upset special?
Indiana needs to create havoc, and that's interceptions, fumbles, sacks, tackles for loss. They need to create that. They've been very good. I think they have 51 points off of turnovers in their 4 games, including 17 last week against Michigan State. They had 17 against Penn State in their opener as well. They're going to have to take the ball away. If both teams play clean, and that's the key for Ohio State, play a clean game. If you play a clean game, Indiana's not beating you. But if Indiana starts winning that turnover battle and cashing in those takeaways for points, it could start getting scary. And that's the game. Just for Indiana, just muck it up. Whether it's a sack, fumble, an interception, maybe forcing a drop pass on third down, something like that to upset Ohio State's rhythm. And Justin Fields has 11 incomplete passes, so it's not going to be an easy task. But Indiana's going to try to do that. That's what they're going to try and do, and that's that key of the game. If Ohio State plays a clean game, takes care of the ball, takes care of business, I think they're going to come away with the victory, and probably a convincing one too.
Yeah, I thought the spread was a little high, 20.5 points. I mean, that surprised me. I know Ohio State's home. I know everyone thinks they're so good. You got Justin Fields, who might win the Heisman Trophy, and as you said, I think 13 touchdowns, 11 incompletions, or whatever that number is. It's pretty crazy. But were you surprised that the spread was 20.5? I mean, 3 touchdowns. We're talking. I think the way Vegas has it, they're talking like a 45-20, a 42-20 type of game with the over/under, something along those lines, 42-21. Were you as surprised as I was? I mean, I thought it might be at max like 16.5, 17. 20.5 seems kind of high.
I wasn't surprised. I thought that was right around the right number. It's. I think a little bit of it goes, it's Indiana. How much? I think they're waiting for Indiana to fall, and you're kind of due for that. And I thought it was fair, and you might get one of those late garbage touchdowns or stuff like that. But that's the way the Indiana Ohio State games have gone in the last couple of years. You've seen Indiana compete, aside from last year, where it was a blowout. But the last couple of years, Indiana's hung around. Maybe settled for field goals when they could have scored a touchdown, and then boom, a turnover happens, a 42-yard touchdown. Something happens in the last quarter, and Ohio State pulls away. And so I thought that the spread was pretty on point at 21.5 or 20.5 or 21, depending on where you went. So I thought I wasn't surprised at all by it.
Cool. Well, that brings us perfectly into our last segment of the show. Give us a little bit. How do you feel this game breaks down? How does it play out? And what's your final score prediction?
I think Indiana stays in it for a little bit, and Ohio State just talent pulls away. It's supposed to rain in Indy on Saturday. I don't know what the weather in Columbus is. I forgot to look, but it really won't matter. But my prediction is, I said on my podcast, so Ohio State 38, Indiana 17, which is right at that 21-point spread. Indiana stays in it. Ohio State pulls away late. But if Indiana starts creating takeaways, that could change. But I think Ohio State, is it rest versus rust? And if it's rest, Ohio State's gonna, I think, gonna roll pretty evenly.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really close game in the first half. I think the teams are going to feel each other out a little bit. They're going to deliver some heavyweight blows, and I think Ohio State's going to figure it out. I think everyone's been waiting for them to put together a complete game. I think they're pretty angry coming off that Rutgers game, up 35-3 at half, only to win 49-27. I mean, yeah, Rutgers had trick plays and things like that, and Ohio State just kind of fell asleep at the wheel, but I know the coaches got after them pretty good, and they've been chomping at the bit to play. They were pretty disappointed. Last week's game got canceled, but I think it was somewhat of a blessing in disguise. It got them healthy. It allowed them a few extra days to prepare for this game, and I think they're going to come out and they're going to finally put together a performance that I think everyone's been waiting for. I've got it 45-20. I think it might be something like, 20-13 at halftime or 17-13 at halftime, and then I think Ohio State's going to pull away. But, I'm expecting a good game. I got a ton of respect for Indiana, and, love having you on the show. Love everything you guys do at Hoosier Huddle. It's always great to chat Big Ten football and Hoosiers Buckeyes with you. So thanks for coming on, Sammy. Appreciate it. And definitely looking forward to chatting after Saturday.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Looking forward to the game. It's a brand new world for Indiana football fans. There's some who didn't know that noon was Fox's big. They're like, why isn't it a primetime game? This is Fox's noon is their big show. So it's been a nice awakening. It's great for us, great for business, and hopefully we have a great game on Saturday and everybody stays healthy and we just have fun watching it.
Absolutely, man. Well, everyone go check out HoosierHuddle.com. I'm sure they have some great stuff over there about this weekend's game. It's always good to get a take at, kind of the other team and what's going on there. And, I'm sure they'll have some good stuff. It seems like there's some key injuries to kind of keep in mind. And, be sure to go check them out, HoosierHuddle.com. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the show Around the Oval, presented by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. We will see you next week.